The long queues at petrol stations in both Lagos and Abuja are yet to disappear. In Abuja, motorists and commuters are facing tough times sourcing for petrol. As Arise News correspondent Mary Chenda reports, movement has been greatly affected, while fuel hawkers in jerrycans are having a field day.
The fuel queues at the Ibrahim Babangida Way seem endless. The situation at the Banex area is no different, as there are even longer queues. Mr. Sule is a typical car owner scouting for fuel. He says he has been on the set for fuel in the last 18 hours to no avail.
I've been here since yesterday, 6:30. I resumed here after my work to buy fuel. I couldn't get fuel because the crowd was much and the fuel attendants and the manager, they can't control it. So they vest and shut down. While the black markets I tried to buy to go back to house, 10 liters they are telling me 10,000, which I can't afford. So I have to sleep inside my vehicle.
He is not alone.
I have never seen this kind of queue in my life.
We are here big queue since around 4 o'clock up to now. This after 12 now. They didn't give us fuel.
While fuel is not available at filling stations, it's a different story across the street with black marketers making the kill. They purchase the scarce fuel off the petrol stations and sell for as high as 700 naira a litre. 10 litres go for 7,000 naira and 20 litres sell for 14,000 naira.
Of the transporters go to the fuel station, buy the fuel, go and sell it to the black market or marketers.
This is still the current situation across many fuel stations in Abuja. It's 12 noon and many of these car owners who have been here mostly since yesterday are still unable to get fuel. It looks like the more you look, the less you see. This is a fuel tanker dispensing fuel, but it still looks like there is hardly enough fuel to go around. You can see, okay, it seems like it's about time for fuel for car owners to get into the fuel stations, and you can see all of those drivers running to get into their cars to ensure that they're able to get fuel as soon as this gate is being opened.
The fuel scarcity has affected movement generally.
Now, if you're trying to get a cab across Abuja, you'd realize that it's very difficult today. Now, that's because in the last 24 hours, it's been very difficult for car owners across Abuja to get fuel for their cars.
Now, all this is happening 1 week after the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC, ordered the recall of the contaminated fuel. Oil marketers say they have been on the receiving end.
The product is available now in most of the private depots, but we independent petroleum marketers who has the large retail outlet nationwide, we are having challenges with those private depots because they are selling this commodity at the rate of 162 naira 50 kobo to 165. So that is the reason why most of our marketers cannot be able to load this product.
Well, many fuel stations across Abuja have become a madhouse, a place full of confusion and commotion. Now, this is not very different from what we saw last week when we had the issue of fuel scarcity and the contaminated fuel. There are high hopes that the government would be able to quickly get in this and resolve it. Mary Chinda, Arise News.
The NNPC Limited understands.
Meanwhile, addressing newsmen in Abuja, the Group Executive Director in charge of downstream of the NNPC Limited, Adeyemi Adetunji, said the country has received adequate supply of petrol, which will be distributed nationwide in the coming days.
The NNPC Limited understands the current fuel supply disruptions in many parts of the country, which was caused by the discovery and subsequent quarantine of methanol-blended cargoes or premium motor spirit, commonly referred to as petrol. To address the situation, over 2.3 billion litres will arrive the country between now and end of February 2022. This will restore sufficiency level above the national target of 30 days. As of today, NNPC has over 1 billion litres of petrol in stock, and the petrol being dispensed at the various filling stations in the country is safe. In order to accelerate PMS distribution across the country, NNPC Limited has commenced 24 hours operations at its depots and retail outlets nationwide. Similarly, major oil marketers outside of Nigeria, Moman, and DAPMAN and IPMAN members have commenced 24 hours loading and dispensing activities in some of their designated outlets across the country. Furthermore, NNPC has constituted a monitoring team with the support of the authority and other security agencies to ensure smooth distribution of petrol nationwide. NNPC implores Nigerians to avoid panic buying and assures that the ongoing efforts will be sustained to restore normalcy in a few days' time.
Right, so that's an optimistic outlook there from the Group ED of the downstream sector of NNPC. However, I'm sure you've read reports from IPMAN that we're looking at another 2 weeks. We had hoped, or we had been led to believe by the weekend, or the whole crisis would be over, but obviously queues persist. So there's a difference here. In Mary's report, she interviewed a gentleman from IPMAN talking about the challenges that they are facing. So while it's, I'm sure, will cause some relief in certain quarters to hear from NNPC that we're looking at just a few days, you know, you never can tell how it's going to go. And in the meantime, unfortunately, the black market is doing a brisk business, and that's just what's the saddest thing here. You can make all the calls you like for people to desist from buying fuel in, you know, jerry cans and reselling them at exorbitant prices, but there's always going to be somebody looking to make an opportunity out of a crisis, and that's where we find ourselves. According to Moman, the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, that 2 vessels of petrol that was referred to now in that report has been received by the NNPC. So we do hope that it's as they say, that in the next few days, the queues will disappear, and they never should have reappeared in the first case. It has been stressed on numerous occasions on this show that this, you know, advent of long fuel queues and fuel scarcity in Nigeria ought to have been a relic of the past.
Okay. Whichever way we look at it, this is a very serious embarrassment for NNPC, which enjoys a monopoly on the importation of petrol, more or less, and also the Buhari administration, whose achievements include the fact that the fuel queues are disappeared. The second point is that this is also a statement on the state of our refineries and how the downstream sector has been managed in the country. The third issue is how this has created conspiracy theories, with some people thinking that this is an underhand attempt, although those persons who push that conspiracy theory have not been able to prove it, to justify the removal of petroleum subsidy when eventually it happens. However, I think it's commendable that both the NNPC and the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, popularly known as the authority, have taken responsibility, and they've tried to address the situation. Part of the efforts by the NNPC includes the NNPC giving full disclosure as to, the traders that brought in the fuel, which is something unusual in Nigeria, that level of transparency and accountability. And going a step further to engage the Nigerian public. Last week, senior NNPC officials practically relocated to Lagos to monitor the situation. The head of the authority, as I referred to it earlier, Farouk Ahmed, was also in Lagos. So we see something in terms of effort, in terms of, honesty of purpose in trying to address the situation. What it means is that all the stakeholders realize themselves that this is a big embarrassment. Somebody dropped the ball somewhere. The president has asked that a query be issued. He has ordered an investigation and all of that. But in the midst of all of this, Nigerians continue to suffer. That report by the Arise News correspondent was referring to the situation in Abuja. It's not only in Abuja that people are suffering enormous anguish and pain Yesterday, I had to take Okada because I got trapped around the Falomo roundabout. You can't move anywhere without running into a traffic gridlock. You are lucky maybe when that gridlock is not there, but even then, many of these fuel stations have no fuel. Yeah, NNPC reassures us that 2.3 million liters of fuel, will arrive daily, and that they have in stock over 1 million liters, which was what the NNPC downstream man was saying out there. But the truth is that when this crisis occurred on February 10, one of the first things that IPMAN, the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, put out is that, look, it will take time, and that Nigerians should be ready for suffering for, quite a number of weeks. And the explanation that spokespersons of the Independent Petroleum Marketers offered, which was not addressed in that statement by Adeyemi, is that, look, the stock that they already have in their filling stations, in the tank farms and all of that, contaminated fuel, off-spec fuel, they will need to take them out first. Where would they take them to? There was a suggestion that they will be returned to the original source. Even that will involve cost. Who is going to bear that cost? They raised that question. 2, NNPC itself talked about reblending the fuel, the off-specification fuel. For you to reblend 200,000 liters of fuel, you will need 800,000 liters of on-spec fuel. So cost is also involved. And to clean up the filling stations that are taking in this off-specification fuel, you need to clean up. Cost is also involved. So nobody has addressed the issue of that cost. So while it's reassuring that, fuel, we have 1 million liters in stock, 2.3 million liters are on the way, fine. But have they evacuated the contaminated fuel? Has anybody reblended the off-specification fuel? This is where the main challenge lies. And who is going to compensate all those people whose vehicles have been damaged? Now, the report talked about Abuja. I've mentioned the situation also in Lagos. In Port Harcourt, over 20 fuel stations had to be shut down by the marketers because, in fact, people whose vehicles were damaged, we were told, were beginning to picket those fuel stations. So it's a very embarrassing situation, whichever way you look at it. But what is interesting is that the House of Representatives, the downstream committee of the House of Representatives, they've expanded the scope of their investigation. They're asking the questions, how did the contaminated fuel get into Nigeria? They have asked that the traders that brought the fuel should be suspended. They are also now probing the fuel scarcity situations, why it is going on almost interminably. But NNPC is playing its part by reassuring the people. But the problem will be solved when you and I don't have to go through the agony that we are facing, whether we are in Abuja or Port Harcourt or Lagos or any other part of Nigeria.
So disgraceful that we're having this conversation as an oil-producing country. That fact cannot be overstressed. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rota Sadiri, Michael Wilson, Adeswa Omoruan, and Aaron Akirjada give us updates on Africa and global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Morning, Rotas.
Good morning, Tunu. Good morning, Doctor. Oil and gas is dominating a conversation in Nigeria. I believe we've already, gone through the NNPC's response. The clock is ticking for the state oil company, as they've now said that they are going to, what you see, hopefully, ease in. I think that's the head of the downstream division for NNPC. We've already gone through his comments. Clock is ticking basically for the NNPC. The issue now is from the press release that was released yesterday till we've got about how many hours? 8 hours, 12 hours that have passed since then. The issue now is how soon will the response be felt, and how soon will the queues be reduced? I mean, that's essentially what you and Doctor have touched on. So that's what everyone is waiting to see. It's all good that you've brought out the press release and you've spoken to the media, but now Nigerians essentially need to feel this impact and show that, okay, your 24/7 operations that you've conducted now at your depots in order to get as much pure fuel out into the market, how soon will that be felt? So there's a lot there. Oh, there's a lot for them to chew on. I'm sure Mr. Emmanuel Finney will go through this in the papers, but the story in this day newspaper on oil theft and how it's impacting the economy. You've talked about that extensively on the show, but I encourage everyone to read that because that is still another issue that continues to bog down the state oil company and all the other entities in the government that's trying to keep fuel from being smuggled out of our borders. But we move from that, still within oil and gas. You had a very interesting interview with the zonal coordinator for ASU yesterday, where you asked him, and he was talking about ASU strike, right? And you asked him a question on whether or not ASU supports the removal of fuel subsidies because he stressed the fact that universities are underfunded. So you need money. And where else can you get the money from? I guess, so it made sense you would ask about that. We want to take a listen to what he said to answer that question.
Fuel subsidy. You see, the problem is this. As ASU is a member, is an affiliate of NLC, and our position is not different from that NLC. First and foremost, as a union, we are against the regulation. But most importantly, you can't be talking about fuel subsidy. The government promised us they are going to fix the refinery. Why has the refinery not been fixed? We are subsidizing fuel because we have a refinery at home that are not producing. So let them fix the local refinery and start producing locally. The issue of subsidy or no subsidy, which is a monumental fraud, will not be there. That is our position.
Okay, so this is something needs to be said for this continued narrative that refineries will solve this issue of price for fuel. Now, I went back and dug up an interview from the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, where she was speaking to journalists about two things. One, the subsidy costs, and then two, refineries. But since we just heard from someone from ASU who is talking about the underfunding in education, let's first take a listen. This is from September of 2020. Here she is talking about subsidy costs and what you can use the money for.
And like the minister said, we had about 457 billion in the 2020 budget, provision for fuel subsidy. But there was also a lot more that was not visible. That was foreign exchange subsidy. So our effective fuel subsidy in any year is at least 1 trillion naira. Imagine what you can do with 1 trillion naira in the health sector and in the education sector. It is a lot of money which we didn't have. So we needed to pull that back.
All right. So imagine what you can do with 1 trillion naira in education and healthcare. And also, I like the fact that she actually said that there's an implied FX subsidy because you are bringing in refined petroleum products from overseas and you're spending FX on that. Now, of course, the Dangote refinery is going to erase that. You've saved FX savings on that, right? But now she talks about, this is the crucial part here. This talk that labor unions and other folks continue to harp on about refineries. Here she is, again, September of 2020. Here she is talking about refineries and whether or not they'll have an impact on price.
What we're doing is enabling the petroleum sector to actually grow. There has been a number of refineries that have been licensed for several years now. None of them is willing to come and start refining under the regime that we had where oil is controlled. The Dangote refinery is sitting outside within an export processing zone. So they're insulated from that. When we buy fuel from Dangote, we'll be buying fuel at international market price. The only savings we'll be making will be the savings of freight, that is shipping the goods into the country. But we'll still have landing costs, we'll still have labor costs, and the marketers still have to put a margin. These refineries, green refineries that were supposed to have come and operate, and even refineries that were supposed to co-locate with our existing refineries, can now come in because they will be assured that when they produce they can sell at market rates and actually recover their investment and make some reasonable profit as well.
All right, so I think this really needs to be emphasized going forward. Again, the Dangote refinery sits in an export processing zone because it's going to be expected to export refined fuel to other nations within the region and supposed to get paid for that. I mean, think about this like a restaurant intuitively. The raw materials that restaurants get, raw food or whatever, the cost of cooking it and then processing it into the food that's served to you when you get there. I mean, if any of those input costs rise, what they sell to you is also going to rise. The major input here is crude, which is sold at international market prices. So as far as from a sensitization angle, I'm glad she said that, but this really needs to emphasize because the labor unions are carrying on this narrative over and over again that somehow when refineries come on stream, all of a sudden price of fuel is going to fall. That's not how it works. And I'm really glad that we've heard this, from the minister. But again, it needs to be repeated. Inflation figures, yes, as I mentioned, I did see a deceleration in inflation for January for Nigeria. So 15.6%, 3 basis point drop from 15.63 in December. Food inflation numbers are still high, 17.13 from 17.37 year on year in December. Core inflation, there was almost no change. If you look at the month-on-month figures, you'll see that essentially headline inflation did come down 1.47. Food inflation 1.62. I mean, look at that, 2.19% in December. I mean, that was. Then core inflation, actually, that did rise month on month, 1.25. Finally, Kenya. Kenya Airways says they're forecasting that profits for them will rise this year. They put a big caveat. As long as there's no further disruptions from COVID, they still need a lot of government support. There's still, 48% of Kenya Airways is owned by the Kenyan government, but they're optimistic if there are no COVID impacts on travel. And that's our update.
Thank you, Rotus. But now, just when this inflation figures come in, we now have to deal with this shameful fuel scarcity.
Right.
And I was reading comments from the statistician
Statistician
General. Got there in the end. Okay, Simon Harry, and he was talking about how that's going to cause an increase in inflation because obviously transporters are going to hike up their prices, sellers will hike up their prices, and we know the effects. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, if you look at statistics on the NBS, Nigerians spend majority of their money on food and transportation. And this, on the flip side, if I'm to give any kind of credit to the labor unions, what they're saying is the moment you remove subsidies and raise fuel prices, the impact is like that. I mean, it's overnight. Meanwhile, the savings from subsidies, if you have to move the money out, you on education, on healthcare, that's going to take time, right? So the problem is that you feel the impact immediately. And yeah, it's called the pass-through effect. The pass-through effect from increased fuel prices. I mean, 98%, 99% of goods in this country move by road. So, food and all these other things that are going to be transported, you're going to feel the impact. So it's tough. But this is where sensitization comes in, and you have to let people know about what's going to happen and explain that in the short term there will be pain, but over the medium to long term, it will ease.
Yeah, on the question of the refineries, and Dr. Odukoya, the ASU zonal coordinator,
yes,
in Lagos and the Southwest. Well, he told the same lie as the Nigerian Labour Congress, or organized labor, saying that, look, if the refineries were working, maybe we will not find ourselves in this kind of situation. On this program, the point has been made repeatedly that, yes, everybody is putting their hopes on the fact that the Dangote refinery, when it comes on stream, as promised in September 2022, providing 650,000 barrels of oil, that will solve the problem. But the truth, as has been pointed out, is that the Dangote Group is in this for business.
Exactly.
Okay, and it will buy crude oil at the international price.
Right.
The only thing you can be sure of is that, one, domestic supply will not be a problem.
Right.
The Dangote refineries will be able to meet the needs in the country. And then, of course, it will sell, at export rate. And NNPC is also an investor, the marginal percentage in that particular business. Maybe perhaps if the Dangote refinery were to come on stream, other private refineries were to come on stream, and these other refineries, either they will be fixed or they will be sold as scrap, we probably will not have this problem of specification and contaminated fuel, because the fuel will be produced right here, and the specification that Nigeria needs will be well known. So production will not be a problem. The corruption that has been reported in the crude oil swap system will probably be eliminated. So there's an argument at a certain level to be made for local refining of crude oil products. So I don't think we should just easily dismiss it at the level of cost. Now, those refineries that are there, they have become wasting assets. Nigeria is making losses on them. I mean, the auditor report on those refineries that NNPC made available the other time, we were told that, look, the Nigerian government is spending money maintaining those refineries that are producing nothing, behaving at below capacity. Now, all that loss, if it were to be put into education, for example, then, of course, you could see a difference. So it's not just about cost. There are other issues involved. Now, so Kenya Airways, yes, the new managers are hoping that it will make profit 20%. That Kenya Airways has been running at a loss since 2014.
Exactly.
Parliament had to do some kind of, provide some kind of support, the Treasury rather than the Parliament. The Treasury had to provide some kind of support for that airline. And of course, it had been insolvent even before COVID-19. But now the hope is that with the Omicron variant receding more or less, and that if there is an increase in volume of travels, then the airline may be able to perform. And in 2023, there are plans to forge a partnership with the South African Airways, with the hope that that will raise the level of that particular airline. But generally, airlines in Africa have been suffering. And the big place where suffering in the aviation industry has been witnessed is here in Nigeria.
That is correct.
So we are addressing our own issues. Airlines elsewhere, internationally, have been doing well, relatively, trying to recover. The aviation sector being the most impacted sector, if you like, the travel and tourism sector, in the face of COVID-19. So all of that in Kenya is still about optimism. There's no guarantee that Kenya Airways will get out of trouble. Thank you very much, Roger.
Well, yeah, with regards to the refineries, definitely, I mean, it's about managing expectations more than, talking about the merits or otherwise. It's about the expectations, yeah.
And as for inflation, what is the difference between 15.63% and 15.6%? It's like the difference between Okereke and Okeke, and the average Nigerian is losing purchasing power.
Correct.
The epidemic of empty pockets remains the major challenge that you and I face.
Facts.
Certainly does. Thank you so much, Rotas.
Thank you.
Moving on to more business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from South Africa. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Basically, diplomatic efforts, it appears, are underway, continuing in Ukraine. But it depends who you actually listen to, whether you actually believe anything's happening. The markets like to believe it yesterday. There was a bit of a relief rally. That's sort of continued overnight. Japan up almost 2% in morning trade. In mainland China, we're looking at their inflation figures actually there, which inflation rose slightly less in China than people actually thought it would, but the producer price index is certainly rising too, but it's still all slightly lower than expectations, which means that not a great deal of pressure to do anything about interest rate there. I'll talk to you about whether China and Japan may be changing that when the Fed, if and when the Fed acts fairly soon, but we'll come on to that later on. South Korea doing extremely well, jobs rise at their highest rate in almost 22 years. There's still a swathe of unemployment in that country, but it's showing that it is actually recovering from the pandemic reasonably well. That we were talking yesterday briefly about the tech crackdown in China and what that's meaning for IPOs there. Their new rules have come into effect and they're gradually being felt now. It looks like any company that has more than 1 million customers is going to have to undergo what the Chinese authorities describe as a review before listing overseas. Singapore Bank, UOB, reports fourth quarter profits up by 48%. Now, I put this in the report because it's an important indicator of what many see as the most business-friendly environment in the world. It's a big vote of confidence in where the global economy is doing actually at the moment, and it's right in line with what analysts are expecting. It's focused on Southeast Asia, so in terms of that area, a good result. Global semiconductors, sales have topped $500 billion, so gradually the supply chain issues in that appear to be moving towards a relatively friendly aspect at the moment. That's according to the US-based Semiconductor Industry Association, the SIA, and they said that demand should be rising significantly in the coming years, China, of course, being the biggest market there. Now, as far as the United States is concerned, futures falling slightly overnight, but that's after we saw that massive relief rally yesterday in New York. Again, I suspect a lot of people reading into it what they want to read into it rather than it's actually going on. Joe Biden has said, if Russia proceeds, we will rally the world and undermine Russia's ability to compete economically and strategically. So that was taken as a sort of join together of what's actually going on. But we're going to get those Fed minutes later on, and whether or not that means the Fed is going to tighten or not. I was speaking yesterday about some people feeling as though it's very much behind the curve. I think people still think that, but if it does tighten, remember that's got big implications for Japan and China. It'll make them much harder for them not to hike rates. That's the view. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, regulators are, now this has been going on for some time, but it's gradually ratcheting up now. A look at block trading. This is when banks and hedge funds knowingly or unknowingly give information to traders so they have a full view of what's actually happening in the market, and they can short those shares if they feel that they're going to fall and make a profit out of it. That's a practice which is very much like insider trading, really, and the regulatory authorities in the United States are signaling that they are very much now on the case for that. We saw inflation rise to 5.5% here in the UK this morning in the latest figures, up from December. We're talking about January now, 5.5%. It's up from December's 5.4%, higher than people had expected. Again, much more pressure on the UK to raise interest rates, again from 0.5% to who knows what. Wage growth yesterday and unemployment, not too bad, but wage growth, even though it's not bad, is not really keeping pace with inflation. And that's something which is going to be worrying. This cost of living crisis, cost of living catastrophe, some people are calling it, and I think it's hitting many countries around the world. And also the car industry here, through the aegis of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the SMMT, which is the big car industry trade body, is asking for an electric charge watchdog, because gradually, as more and more charges actually get into place, there is no price control over that at the moment, and that's what they want to do to make sure that motorists are not being charged unfairly. And finally, to commodities, oil pulled back from that $100 a barrel thing. It's now, Brent is now about 96, and again, safe haven assets like gold and also Bitcoin to a certain extent have slightly fallen back. But as I said, yes, I think it's going to be quite an important test of assets like, if you describe them as that, assets like Bitcoin and so on. But oil pulling back from the brink, really. That's the global view.
Okay, two quick things, Michael. The first has to do with the Beijing tech crackdown, the data security law, and also the personal information protection law. Those are the two operative laws in this regard. Yesterday, when we talked about Mehua Medical Technologies trying to list on NASDAQ in New York and raise an IPO of about 57.5 million. I'd raised a concern about whether it will suffer the same fate as Didi. But now with these new rules that China has put in place, what is likely to happen? Does it mean that fewer Chinese companies will do public listing in the U.S. To what extent will it discourage those Chinese companies from doing public listing in the U.S., despite the fact that the United States has a bigger stock exchange than even China, in spite of its population? The second thing is that China, the People's Bank of China yesterday was talking about forming some kind of monetary alliance with countries in the Asian region. Now, before now, they had an arrangement, China had an arrangement with Indonesia, extending this monetary relationship. Well, the whole idea, according to the finance minister of China, is to improve regional cooperation. But we all know that somewhere in there, China is there. So to what extent can this protect these countries against the U.S. Federal Reserve, which may likely very soon begin to tighten, our policy? Those two questions. And then finally, markets seem to have rallied yesterday when Russia, the Russian defense spokesperson, announced that Russia will embark on the withdrawal of troops from Crimea, from Western Russia, and also from Belarus, and that all troops will return to their stations. But the Americans tell us that there's no proof, concrete proof on the ground, that any kind of withdrawal is taking place. But the markets have rallied almost immediately by about 1%, marginal, but what should we expect? Who knows what exactly is going on? Can Russia be trusted?
That is the question, isn't it? Who knows? And of course, we don't. The Americans are being very negative about it. The Europeans are saying that they think that Russia is withdrawing some troops from the border. There's still 100,000 troops, as I understand it, there at the border. Russia has all along said it doesn't want to invade. So it's all these balls in the air. I think we were talking yesterday, weren't we, about, I did a sort of survey of what asset managers were thinking over the weekend at the beginning of the week, and the general view is that this sort of diplomatic guessing game will continue over the next few weeks, and there'll be sparks of uncertainty. So the markets will, I think, remain very volatile. I'm with you on it, really. I think that what the markets were doing was hearing what they wanted to hear over last night and so on, and gradually it comes back. Remember that a lot of these traders have never lived through anything like this before, number one. Number two, the very important thing is that people make money out of the markets whether they go up or down, so it's important that there is a movement one way or the other. I don't think there are many clear heads saying don't do anything at the moment. I think we just have to, I'm sorry, it's a dreadfully careworn and a dreadfully journalistic warm phrase, but wait and see to see what happens. That's all we can do. As far as China's concerned, should we bunch those two things together? I do feel as though China's trying to do a lot of things all at once. It's trying to be an authoritarian state. It's trying to keep an eye on data, as we saw this new benchmark, which we believe to be companies with fewer than a million users will be okay, but above that kind of level they'll be open to some sort of review of what they do. Whether that will include them listing abroad, who knows. I think what I was saying yesterday was that I think it's very important that if one was doing the story, you'd need to find out whether some of these companies that want to do IPOs abroad are doing it because there's not the money at home within which to invest. And secondly, are they doing it to spread their wings internationally? And what kind of table does China want to be trading at? I mean, these are the questions really that none of these surface events have a great deal to do with. What we need to do is delve right underneath. And I feel as though the messages from China, as ever, are fairly mixed. I mean, I feel the future is in trade, is in cooperation, but whether China will want that, and don't forget, it's still continuing its Belt and Road initiative, which is gradually crawling up Africa and crawling through some of the states in Europe as well. So there's a lot going on. So again, we measure China very, very carefully indeed. No question, it will be the biggest economy in the world in a few years' time, but it will have all the kind of problems that maturing economies have, not least of which an aging population. So there's lots to think about there. These are little milestones, these are little inches forward, little bits of detail. But underneath the bigger questions, I'm not sure anybody, but the authorities in China actually know the answers to right now.
Ask you, Mr. Wilson, whether or not this is counterproductive, that Beijing clampdown, since China wants to be the superpower for artificial intelligence, but you've addressed a lot of that. Maybe we'll discuss further tomorrow about whether national security trumps commercial interests. But thank you very much for your time. Now for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Omoruan is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Great to be here again.
Morning. This hairdo, is it new? I spotted it around, was it 6:30 a.m. or 7 a.m.? And I thought I would bring it up.
You know, Dr. Abati had made vast improvements in spotting new hairdos while they are new. It is not new. I'm going to answer for this one. It's not new, Dr. Abati. She's had it for a few days.
Oh, okay. I just noticed this morning around 6:30 a.m.
Dr. Abati, we've come so far with noticing when hair changes. Oh, dear.
Okay.
Dr. Abati, you are forgiven.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right, now to some serious business about the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the last remaining countries to report any COVID-19 case is the small island nation or Pacific nation of Cook Islands has now reported the first COVID-19 case in that country. A reminder that the virus is truly borderless. So far, 415 million infections have been recorded so far, according to the Johns Hopkins University tally. In Italy, yesterday, more than 500,000 people over the age of 50 who are not vaccinated are now banned from going to work and will not receive even sick pays. This is as the world has now administered at least 10.2 billion vaccine doses against the virus. Let's look at the data here in Nigeria and some other developing stories around COVID-19 from around the world. In Nigeria, 33 new infections and thankfully no COVID-19 related deaths were officially reported in the past 24 hours. However, the new infections, the 33 of them, came in from 4 states as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. To date, Nigeria has now reported over 254 cases of the virus. Many people recover from this virus, I must add. However, there are those who still have symptoms that linger for weeks and for months, otherwise known as long COVID. Now, the vaccination agency in Nigeria, the NPHCDA, says Lagos and Kano states have vaccinated about 1.5 million eligible persons, while Jigawa state has vaccinated over 2.1 million individuals. 22 states, it says, have their dropout rates between the first and second doses at less than 60%. That's another thing countries need to look out for. Those who show up for their first dose and don't show up for their second dose. States said, the NPHCDA also adds the states with upcoming improvement in the second dose uptake are Plateau, Gombe, Ondo, as well as Ekiti. Now, let's move away from Nigeria. We do know that vaccines are becoming increasingly available on the continent of Africa. However, countries are struggling to get those jabs into arms. And in South Africa, the country is hoping to encourage more vaccination by offering food vouchers to people in their 50s in its Gauteng region. This region covers the capital, Pretoria, and the largest city, Johannesburg. It's offering a 200 Rand food voucher. That's an equivalent of about $13.26 US dollars. Meanwhile, in neighboring Zimbabwe, the government is doing quite the opposite, I must say. It says it will stop paying salaries to its workers who are unvaccinated. It has also ordered those that are vaccinated to report to work physically with immediate effect. This is because they have been working from home since the beginning of the pandemic. And Novak Djokovic is in the news again. He granted an interview to the BBC since he was deported from Australia. Well, he says he's willing, he's ready to miss out on tournaments and trophies if that's the price he has to pay for not getting a COVID-19 jab. He adds that he is no anti-vaxxer and he distances himself from anti-vaccination protests around the world. So that's Djokovic. And finally, The Queen is back to work, and of course, there had been concerns raised about her health after she had interaction with her son, who tested positive on Thursday last week, and his wife, Camilla, who tested positive yesterday. So back to you guys.
I told you about Huey too. She's unstoppable and untouchable. So. I'm going to send you some more memes, Adeswa, after the show. But I wanted to talk about Djokovic. Oh dear. I mean, we all like a man with the courage of his convictions, but when those convictions are entirely wrong, this is so painful to see. You know, he's so adamant about this vaccine. And yes, we all love Djokovic, those of us who are fans of his, for his mental fortitude. This is like the wrong expression of it, the worst expression of it. He's taking a huge gamble, assuming that he's going to be in peak physical health. And I hope that he is. I hope that he can make up this lost time. But if we ask Pete Sampras, we will know from Pete Sampras's experience that even the most elite athletes, their health can take a downturn in a snap second. Pete Sampras had to retire early because he had some kind of blood disorder that was causing shortness of breath, and nobody saw that coming. So I do hope that Djokovic and his gamble, I hope it really pays off for him. As for South Africa offering the vouchers, I mean, the carrot and stick, they're going the carrot route, and Zimbabwe is applying the stick. The whole idea is just to get everybody vaccinated. I just cannot believe we live in a world in 2022 where this is such an issue for people, where people are so recalcitrant, banging on about their rights over this COVID, and it's got nothing to do with their rights. It's got nothing to do with the science. It's got nothing to do with the actual vaccine. It's all about politics. A lot of people have been brainwashed by certain far-right groups, and they don't even realize it. Because we all know if your child has chicken pox, you don't send your child to school. You keep your child at home. Why is it that nobody ever says, oh, it's against my freedoms and my child's freedom. I have the right to take my child with chicken pox. No, this is about COVID-19, and they don't understand it's not medicine, it's not science, it is politics and indoctrination. It's really sad.
Okay, on Djokovic's position is that he's not an anti-vaxxer. He says he's not against vaccination, but that he does not believe in the idea of somebody telling him what to do, that he cannot be forced. So in other words, he's a defender of the freedom of choice. But what is funny here is that, look, COVID-19 global vaccination is not about individualism. It's not about what you think. It's about keeping the global community safe for everyone. And in that regard, Djokovic says, oh, he doesn't have enough information about the vaccination process. What other information does he need? He's been down with COVID himself twice. And, you know, he's also at risk. He's vulnerable like everyone else. I hope that somebody will sit him down and explain what COVID-19 is all about and the importance of vaccination, because he seems to be speaking from a position of ignorance rather than defending the freedom of choice. The other leg of it is that by saying he's willing to stay away from tournaments because he's convinced that nobody should force him. Well, he may well jeopardize his prospects of becoming the greatest male, tennis players of all time. So at the end of the day, he will be the one that will suffer the injury. But the only thing to take away from him is that he says he has an open mind. So it's good that he has an open mind. So maybe someday he will come around and take the vaccine. Now, as for South Africa, in the Gauteng region, the Gauteng Department of Public Health offering vouchers, grocery vouchers, worth about 200 rand, about $13 to persons who are above 50. Well, haven't we seen this before in parts of the United States, from Missouri to the eastern coast in many of the states, just to encourage people to get more vaccinated? South Africa has the highest rate of infection in Africa, about 3.7 million cases, and out of that, about 97,000 deaths. But it's also been able to move ahead in terms of the vaccination rate in Africa. So this is just a way of mobilizing more people. As for Zimbabwe, yes, Zimbabwe says if you are not vaccinated, you can't come to work. Your salaries will not be paid. Very similar to what the Nigerian government said, but I don't know what the federal government of Nigeria is doing. about that, because the last time we heard about it, people have just resorted to their normal ways. Zimbabwe is also saying people should come back to work. 22% vaccination rate in Zimbabwe. But the problem is that the labor organization in Zimbabwe has gone to court to say that this is an issue of human rights, as we saw also in the United States with regard to the vaccine mandate imposed by the Biden administration. And as we're witnessing resilience and rebellion in Canada with the Freedom Convoy and the copycat, convoys in Israel, in the Netherlands, and elsewhere. So, but let us see how that plays out. Finally, Netherlands is saying it's removing all restrictions by February 25, because they've been able to manage it, the Omicron threat very well. So Netherlands is one of those few countries that have removed all restrictions. They say, yes, you are still required to wear masks in public transport and at the airport, but that it is not obligatory. And people are just advised to be careful. Yeah. Thank you very much, Adesua.